Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent telling the rest of the president's cabinet this afternoon that Trump is working to restore trust in the central bank. Bessent doing so without mentioning Lisa Cook, the board member who Trump said he was dismissing late yesterday. Cook's attorney now saying she plans to sue over that firing. Joining us now to discuss, former Clinton Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, also the former director of the National Economic Council in the Obama administration. Sir, thank you so much for being here. Always really appreciate it. You, of course, heard what Scott Bessent just said there. I don't think it's a secret that Bessent may be in line to be the next chairman of the Federal Reserve. Trump, the president, may have that be sooner rather than later. But big picture here, what do you think he's trying to accomplish with the firing of Lisa Cook? Is it really about Lisa Cook?
No, this is about the assertion of political control and intimidation. This comes in the same week when investigators from the FBI were sent to the home of a former national security advisor, when a wind company had a major project shut down, when a former political associate of the president was explicitly threatened by the president, and when much else has happened. It comes in the context of an unprecedented level of attack by the president against the Federal Reserve. I don't understand how Secretary Bessent could believe that the president's demands that interest rates be cut to 1% represent some kind of contribution to buttressing the Federal Reserve's credibility. There's a reasonable debate about what the right path of interest rates is. There's no serious observer who shares the president's view about 250 or 300 basis point cuts in interest rates. This is based on, as best one can tell, a kind of enemies list established by a regulator who, at the FHFA, Mr. Pulte, who seems to force the companies he regulates to reveal information that can be used to attack enemies of the president. Most recently, Lisa Cook, but before that, Senator Adam Schiff, before that, the Attorney General of New York. So this is really a very problematic place, and markets haven't responded dramatically yet, but the response to this immediately after it happened was people did think that we were going to have easier monetary policy, and as a consequence, they thought we were going to have more inflation, and so long-term interest rates rose and the dollar went down. So it's the kind of pattern that we're not used to seeing in the United States, but that is seen all the time in emerging market countries where there's questions about the credibility of institutions.
Sir, we were discussing a little bit earlier the question of who actually has to follow through on the firing of Lisa Cook, and the question of whether that's actually Jerome Powell and whether that may set up a way for the president to ultimately fire Jerome Powell for cause. Can you give us any insight into how the president's attempt to do this might put Jerome Powell in a spot that the president could then use?
I'm not a lawyer. I think it's important to recognize that whereas the Deputy Secretary of Defense reports to the Secretary of Defense, members of the Board of Governors of the Fed do not in any sense report to the chairman of the Federal Reserve. They're each independently Senate confirmed and each independently accountable for their conduct and behavior. So I don't think it's Mr. Powell's job to resolve this. I think it's Mr. Powell's responsibility to stand up for the rule of law. That means due process and considering accusations against an individual of the institution that he leads. but it's not for him to act with respect to these kinds of actions by the president. This is of a piece with other efforts to fire people. I was encouraged by the Supreme Court decision several months ago in which a sharp distinction was drawn between the Federal Reserve and regular executive agencies of the federal government in terms of limiting the president's power with respect to the Federal Reserve. So I think this will be, we don't know all the facts, and so I don't want to rush to judgment, but this seems, in terms of process, to have been a highly problematic action by the president from a legal point of view. And from a prudential point of view, I think it surely contributes. Indeed, it's what the president said, and indeed, it's what Scott Bessent said in the clip you played, contributes to a sense that we're going to have political control of monetary policy. And the general judgment has been that political control of monetary policy means less credibility. That means higher inflation expectations. And that probably means higher inflation and a weaker economy. And it also means that there's no other place for the president to go in terms of blame than himself if we have economic outcomes that none of us prefer. So I think this is a surprising and an imprudent action on the president's part.
All right. Former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, always grateful to talk to you, sir. Thanks very much for being here.
Thank you.
All right. Still to come here in the arena, your English teacher and your gym teacher are getting married. Ahead, how Taylor Swift announced her engagement to her lover. Plus, as President Trump threatens to send the National Guard into Chicago, he's also rolling out a new policy for prosecutors in the nation's capital.
Anybody murders something in the Capitol,